Thank you, Annie, and let's get started. So the title of my keynote for today is Where ITSM is Heading and the Impact on Identity and Access Management. So I will also, on one hand, look a little on what is happening within the ITSM space. As I've said, I'm following this space for long, I think even before things like ITIL were invented. And on the other hand, I'm an identity management guy, and we are discussing for 15 years probably already how identity access management and IT service management fit together, how they overlap, how to integrate these. And this is something we have a very, very long, very intense experience from a large number of advisory projects and discussions with end user organizations, etc. So I'd like to share some of the insight here. And so let's get started. And let's get started with this term of ITSM. So ITSM stands for IT Service Management. And in some way, this term already says what it's really about. It's about managing IT services, making IT services available. And when we look at the definition we, for instance, find in the Wikipedia, so the Wikipedia then says, it's information technology service management. These are the activities that are performed by an organization to design, plan, deliver, operate, and control information technology services offered to customers, where customers very frequently are the internal users, but at the end, it's every type of IT service. And this design, plan, deliver, operate, control, and improve is something when, in case you're familiar with ITIL, so the IT infrastructure library, as a set of standard processes around IT service management. And as I said, improve comes to it, but that basically is what ITIL is covering. And so services can be everything. It can be requesting a PC or a notebook. So many had to request notebooks in these days. It can be requesting access. It can be delivering certain types of applications and other services. So it's really all these types of services and how to manage these and how to also provide access to that. But when we look at how things are evolving, and for instance, look at how the ServiceNow describes itself in some ways, so something I picked from their website, then it also becomes obvious that this definition of IT service management is changing, that it gets broader than it has been. So when we look at that, then they are talking about built on the Now platform, which is their platform. The product portfolio delivers the IT employee and customer workflows that matter with, and so on, to help drive every part of digital transformation. I've underlined two parts of that. The one part is the platform. So it's not just a tool anymore in the thinking of ServiceNow and other vendors, it's a platform. Such a platform thinking we also observe in other areas. So when you look at what Salesforce is doing in the CRM space, it's far more than a traditional CRM, and they are talking about their platform. Other vendors are talking about their platform. So we see more and more of these platform-based approaches emerging, and this then spans far more areas than just the IT services. So there's a lot of sort of a workflow platform, in which is not only for IT workflows, but for employee workflows, for customer workflows. So these solutions are expanding and getting a sort of taking increasingly a different role. And I'll touch the sort of the strategic relevance within IT in a minute, but with this shift from it's just an IT tool for managing IT service from an IT perspective, we see a shift towards this is a platform where we can build a lot of workflows, a lot of capabilities within our organization on. Within this IT service management, we have a couple of components in the core. So when we look at the ITSM core, then this is very much about three elements. It is, let's start to the right side. It's a CMDB, a configuration management database. This is some sort of asset management. It's tracking what do we have which elements do we have within our IT, and not only the assets, but also the configurations. So it is really a big repository. We have catalogs which describe the IT services that are provided. So there's based on these elements we have in IT, which services do we provide? And they are in these catalogs, in these service catalogs. And then we have the processes around it, so automation, but also workflows, which is the core. And so standard processes, as I've already mentioned, are described in ITIL in the IT infrastructure library as a standard, which still is I believe, a good starting point for what you do within IT service management, because it's a very practice-driven, pragmatic, well thought out, and mature description. So as a starting point, it definitely is a good thing to start. But beyond this as I've said, this technical perspective and the traditional perspective on IT service management, we really see that IT service management increasingly shifting into a role of a strategic element within the IT within the IT, overall IT, not only the IT infrastructure. It's really one of these components where companies make strategic decisions and say, okay, we build on vendor A, B, or C. So there, as we all know, a couple others than just ServiceNow. So there are a couple of options in this IT service management field, such as BMC and Cherwell and Ivanti and various others. So I don't want to name everyone here. So we see this these discussions about becoming strategic, but we also should be careful and thoughtful. Maybe thoughtful is the better term here when it comes to these various types of, or when it comes to these strategic decisions. So if we go for a platform and say this is a strategic platform we build on, then this has a consequence, and that consequence is that we invest in this platform. We put more and more effort in operating that platform and adding services, and we clearly have a risk of a vendor lock-in. And that is not per se a problem. If we understand that there is this lock-in, that if we understand what it does it mean to get out of a platform, if we plan also for all these aspects. And I think vendor lock-in at certain levels is quite common. So when you look at the ERP space, when you look at mainframes in earlier days, etc., the most important thing is that you make an informed, well thought out decision. So it's about being thoughtful here. One of the discussions I heard over the past couple of months more frequently is that with these platforms becoming strategic, there's this intention of making as much capabilities available on the platform. So it some sort becomes one of the main user interfaces. And I think one thing should be considered carefully. Is this really the user's preferred interface? Is it really the right way to do it? And there are different perspectives. On the other hand, I'm long enough in the industry to prefer today's interfaces, and every UI has its strengths and its weaknesses. But when I compare it with what I've been using 10 years or 20 or 30 years ago, this morning I just thought about the days of DOS and DOS-based applications. So I think we should also be realistic in that. And it's my perspective is it's better to have one place where I find everything than to have a lot of super cool interfaces which are totally disparate from each other. But it's something we need to look at. With the platform approach, another point is we have some risk of a feature overload. So we have this risk that at the end, we put more and more things on the platform, and we also might put things, that's something I touch in the context of IGA in a minute, we put things on a platform which are better than somewhere else. So while it's really good to have a single interface, we should be careful with doing everything on a platform, specifically with building ourselves everything on the platform. I had this discussion in other areas as well. So if you take platforms for which are built for consumer or customer relationship management, does it really make sense to do things like whatever time management and other things, project management on these platforms. Be careful. Some things make sense, some things you get out of the box, and we have a lot of talks here today, for instance, also by ClearSky, which built their IGA as a standard product, as a commercial off-the-shelf solution on a platform, which then could make sense. If you do it yourself, be super, super careful. Also something we'll discuss a lot today. Very positively, I think, is that with the evolution of these platforms, we are shifting closer to saying, okay, we have the central platform for running our workflows, our processes, something which is discussed, which has been started in many organizations a couple of times over the course of many, many years. And we have really potential here. So there's a strategic potential. And if you are thoughtful, this really might help us in doing what we need to do within our organization to get better in delivering the right IT services in the right way at the right time. And this is what we should target it. And then there's this identity and access management thing. So as I've said, I'm an IAM guy in some way. I have a long history in identity and access management, but I also have been looking at IT service management for really many, many years. And so what is the link? The obvious link is service requests and access requests. So it's about requesting. So if you request an IT service, you go to your IT service management. Traditionally, if you request access, you go to your IAM tool. Maybe you also go for SAP requests, a separate tool, etc. And I think the complaints are known to many of us, of users saying, okay, I don't know where I need to request what. Having one interface is one UI is something which is logical. And this is one of the links we have. But also the catalogs. When we, for instance, talk about application onboarding in IGA, in identity management overall, the catalogs we have, the CMDBs really might help. And we should also expose services in catalogs. And then there's another area, which is I think, an absolutely must integration area, which is manual fulfillment. So when we look at IGA, so the Identity Governance Administration, then it is that we have some systems which we have connected for automated provisioning. So if we have a new user, that account is created automatically, maybe in our Microsoft Active Directory. But we always will have systems which are not connected that way, which are where we just have a manual fulfillment to do. And the best way to do that is relying on the IT service management, create a ticket, track the ticket, and have a very well-coordinated, transparent manual fulfillment here. And as I said, I touched it in a little earlier, we have the CMDB and application onboarding relationship. But as always, there are also challenges. You can't do that wrong. You can do it very, very wrong. So I've seen projects where organizations spend many years of design work and architecture work to identify the way they intended to integrate it. Doesn't make sense. The one thing is, even when we talk interfaces, we need to have the right interface for the right task. So identity management has its specifics when it comes to requesting access, to approving access, which is pretty much standard, you say. But when you look at reviewing access, when you look at certain other tasks, then things might become more complex. And so the question is, how do you integrate interfaces, integrate UIs? How do you do it right so that it really works for the task? And what we definitely must achieve is we must achieve some consistency, which can be built in a different way. So there's the AP-based integration, deep links, etc. A lot of technology I'll leave out here for now, but it is, you need to really think about it, you do it. If you integrate workflows, that might make a lot of sense, but you need to ensure that you really can track where the workflow stands. Take manual fulfillment. If you start the workflow maybe in your ITSM tool, then you reach out to your IGA tool to start the provisioning process, and you have some approval either there or there, and then the manual fulfillment starts maybe to a couple of systems. Then you still need to be able to know where does this request stand. So you need to collect data from IGA and from ITSM to bring it together. You need a status, you need this integration. And you need to be aware of that certain things are really better done in IGA. So complex entitlements, if you have a multi-layer role concept or multi-layer entitlement model, this is far more granular than a service you commonly handle in an IT service management tool. And if you look at segregation of duties, then there's a lot of logic, a lot of rule engine behind that. It doesn't make sense, and this is my warning, to create this yourself on an ITSM platform. You need that integration in that case, or you need something which is packaged, which is commercial off the shelf, running on that platform, but don't start doing these things yourself. And my colleague Warwick a little later will go really far more into detail on these things. Also, target system integration for provisioning. So I've seen projects where someone has said, okay, we built, we have these workflows, we built the request and approval, and then we start provisioning on one of these ITSM platforms. The challenge is that you might have an Active Directory connector and maybe also an Azure Active Directory connector and a few others, but you really quickly come to the end of the list of you have in an ITSM and the capabilities compared to what you have in IGA. So again, rely on the capabilities that are readily available by a vendor, not try to rebuild things yourself. So what is the strategy? It's about align and integrate. Start talking with each other if you're not already doing it. Go for really deep integration, but well thought out integration. So it's not you rebuilding within your organization, it's about integrating. And it's when you integrate, also, and I'll touch this soon, do it based on out of the box capabilities. You also should think about where does UI integration make sense and where not. So the easy access might be really via the ITSM tool because you have it. And I know more and more IGA vendors, for instance, provide an app in the store of one of these vendors, which allows to access the identity management to start and request process, etc. Don't reinvent identity management yourself on top of the IT service management. And on the other hand, be aware that manual fulfillment via IT service management is really a must. You must do it. Also think about new capabilities such as application onboarding. So think beyond. There's a need for application onboarding, for instance. So in the remaining 1 or 2 minutes, let's summarize that. As I said, the hint number one is align and integrate. So this is really super essential. If you decide that you have a strategic ITSM platform, then you should go for a consistent UI. Then you should shoot for UI-based or UI-level integration, because that really helps you to do things better, to come up with a consistent interaction interface and one single interface, one point to start for your users. That makes a lot of sense. And best done is this with APIs, so that it is really consistent. Deep links where you just unlink to the IGA tool also might do if done right, but then the IGA UI you expose via such a link should look a little bit the same like the ITSM interface. So no hard changes here in that space. You have this ticketing thing. I touched it a couple of times. It is a must. So the ticketing for manual fulfillment is absolutely essential. You need to have it. And last but not least, and that is really the point, what you do in integration should be best based on what vendors provide. So don't go for building integrations yourself if you can avoid it. And don't reinvent IGA yourself. That doesn't make sense, because at the end you will have so much maintenance and development to do that it doesn't make sense. So go for out-of-the-box solutions in IGA and in integration, whichever way. There are different ways, as we will learn today, to do that, but do it that way. With that, I'm at the end of my talk, and we should have a little time also for questions. So if you already entered the questions, then let's start with the questions. Aside of that, and Annie will probably say it again. I'm also available in one of the breakout rooms in a few minutes so that we can go into more detailed discussions.